hopefully everyone is doing fine, including our speaker, of course. So today we are going to talk about this subjects related to this semester's study. What was that?
Some noise, but we muted it. Okay, so
Okay.
that's the role of the co-host.
Okay, so the topic of this webinar today has something to do with our campaign, the smart consumer campaign of 2020. So today we are fortunate to have a zero waste practitioner with us to share his knowledge and experience in practicing low carbon lifestyle in Malaysia. So let me just briefly introduce our speaker for today, Mr. Muhammad Faisal Abdur Rani. So he received his Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering, majoring in Environmental Processes, and Bachelor of Art in History, majoring in Religious Studies, both from Montana State University. So now he is a certified green project manager and a zero waste practitioner for already 4 years, and a low carbon lifestyle practitioner for 2 years. So he is currently the co-founder and program director of Impact Lucian, head of Waste Management Division for the Sustainable Business Network Association Malaysia, and holds an advisor for Generasi Peduli Sampah, and holds several other positions in groups that focus on minimizing our impact to the environment. So he has also been involved in numerous projects that are targeted to save the environment, such as the Kuala Lumpur Low Carbon Society Blueprint and Sungai Bunus River of Life project. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Faisal. Thank you for accepting our invitation and taking the time to share with us despite everything that you have going on your plate. So
My pleasure.
so before I pass the session to Mr. Faisal, I would like to remind the students to listen to the talk carefully, since it has a very important part in your consumer campaign. And please, you're welcome to ask questions. The speaker will either prompt you during between his talk for you to ask questions, or you can ask at the end of the session. So you can also leave your question in the chat box or unmute your mic to ask Mr. Faisal. So okay, over to you, Mr.
All right.
Faisal.
Thank you. First of all, Assalamualaikum and good afternoon to everyone. Let me start sharing my screen. All right. So basically, it's like as been introduced, I'm Faisal Abdur Rani. I'm a certified green project manager by GPM Global, which is a certification body in green in professional certificate for project manager from the United States. So in the last few years, basically doing a lot of this work. Some of the recognition was I was awarded the Sustainability Award 2018 by GPM organization USA, among hundreds of project managers across the world. And then I was one of the recipients for the Star Golden Heart Award for 2000 in my work in doing a lot of this education, and also some of the local recognition for the Malaysian National Sustainable Project of the Year and Malaysia National Fundamental Recognition Award in terms of from the GPM Malaysia itself. I've been a zero waste practitioner for 4 years. That means in the last 4 years, what I've been trying to do is trying to not to put any more waste back to the landfills. And that's what my definition is. My definition of zero waste is zero waste to landfill, zero waste to burning. So I try not to put as much or minimizing as much as possible waste going back to the landfills, right? Then once I achieve the whole idea of zero waste in 2018, so I start to look at the next step, which is low carbon lifestyle. So the idea of low carbon life is to understand is because at that point I understand that waste is just a part of it, right? So carbon footprint is another part that we need to look into. So looking into a low carbon lifestyle to understand what is the challenges and how we can improve in a lot of these senses, right? So the idea is that what is sustainable, and ethical? And I think in a lot of conversation when we talk about sustainability, we always forget about the ethical portion, right? So we talk about sustainability, but the ethical part, it is a very uh, important part in this whole structure of sustainability. Sustainability cannot exist without ethical, right? So, so what is sustainability and ethical consumption? So basically, it is knowing the full cycle of what we consume and how we can look at minimizing the carbon footprint and damages to the three elements, which is our environmental, our social, and our economy. So when we talk about sustainability and ethical, we need to know. There's no such thing as we don't want to know. For example, right? We let's think about it. Where it does our things come from, right? That is the most key thing. So where does a lot of this thing come from? We have to understand, if we buy something, we need to ask, is it made sustainably, or is it use forced labor, is it use child labor, right? We need to ask those questions, because you cannot consume something that is that we want something sustainable, but we still use child labor that is mining for the rare metal earth, right? We cannot do that. It's not ethical in that sense. So sustainability and ethical must come hand to hand. That's why I think a lot of the time we've been talking about the SDGs, right? The Sustainable Development Goals. When we talk about this whole idea of Sustainable Development Goals, the ethical portion is in there, and we must question our full cycle of our product in terms of our consumption, our supply chain. Where does everything come from, right? So this is where sometimes it's like I like to ask, if we stop for 10 minutes to think what we consume, is it sustainable? Right? From every single thing. That is the first part for us to really think. Is it affecting the environment? Is it socially like made from a reliable source? Economy, is it used the most economical sense in terms of buying all these things? So we have to think about it, right? And before I go on to further, so I think it's like this video explaining the whole structure of what is sustainability itself.
Hi guys! Do you have time for a few quick questions? I see you're having a lot of fun. But do you ever stop and think if what you do is sustainable? And do you know what sustainable development means? Sustainable development is to make the world a better place for everyone now without destroying the possibilities for the next generations. If you wonder if something is sustainable, you can ask yourself, can we do this over and over again forever? Sustainable development means that we need to keep three things in mind at once: social progress, economic development, and climate and environment. First of all, we have to take care of our planet. We have many natural ecosystems that must be in balance in order for us to live here. The climate system is one of them. This system ensures that the temperature is correct and that the atmosphere emits exactly the right amount of solar energy. When we emit harmful greenhouse gases, such as CO2, we clog the atmosphere. This changes the temperatures on Earth, which again affects our development. How we produce and use energy is incredibly important. Oil and coal are examples of energy we may run out of. Water, wind, and sun, however, will always be here. Using the lasting sources of energy that renew themselves is good for the planet and can provide jobs for years to come. Economics. Almost everything we develop, buy, and trade starts with nature. The smarter we use our natural resources and the better systems we create for a fair distribution, the more sustainable we are. One way to contribute to a more even distribution is to be more aware of what we buy and how it is produced. A football is a good example. It travels far before it reaches the football players. First, materials are made. Then, they print the logo somewhere else before a third country sews it all together. One single football sees the whole world before it reaches its goal. This journey ties us together. If we are to win the battle for a sustainable future, we have to play with fair rules that applies to everyone. Social progress. We humans are part of nature, but we're also important resources for the world. Just like water, the forest, and the sun, we have minds that can create the strangest and most creative things. But for us to be the best versions of ourselves, there are certain things that must be in order, like having equal opportunities to education, safety, food, and medicine. This provides greater opportunities for us as human beings, but also for the planet. We just have to think in new ways. These three must work together. That is sustainable development. And there's actually a plan for this. All the countries of the United Nations have agreed on a joint plan for sustainable development. But for the plan to work, we need to cooperate, and we need you to be on board. Are you with us?
So I think the video like everything that we consume comes from somewhere, right? And we realize that the planet is finite. It is not infinite. Nothing that we produce will last forever, right? Either it's like our fossil fuels, even it's like material to build like all this renewable technology for renewable energy itself. It is not something that is say that is unlimited. There is limit how much we can mine, how much we can produce, right? So that's why I said, and in terms of environmental impact, it's like whatever we consume or do, there is an environmental impact. One way that we measure is through carbon footprint, right? So, and in terms of carbon footprints, there is multiple calculators that out there that you can use to really calculate your carbon footprints. But basically, to understand how we impact the environment as an individual, there are three main criteria that we always evaluate. One is our dietary habits, right? Our dietary habits.
The session? Okay. Please go on, Mr. Faisal. So sorry about that.
No problem, no problem. So, like I said, it's like whatever we do at the end of the day, there is an environmental impact, right? So we have to acknowledge this. Nothing that we do is like either it's like in the environmental, let's say developing new technology, green technology, is that there's no such thing as no impact. No, there is an impact. So we have to address this and acknowledge this for us to be able to properly assess in terms of how we can minimize, right? Now, to when we look into of carbon footprints, right? So industry has a lot of their own measurements, right? So building has their own energy efficiency buildings. They have all this energy consumption. So using some of these multiple calculators to really assess, that's one part of it. So individually, you can use any of these multiples calculator online that to really measure your own carbon footprints. In terms of the reliability of how accurate it is hard because when you use one calculator to another, it is quite difference, right? So the questions and everything. But at the end of the day, it's like the area that they are kind of looking into, there's three elements, which is one is the dietary habits, right? Dietary habits, what we eat, what we consume. Is it more plant-based? Is it more animal-based? Is it locally produced? It is imported. So those has a how we can measure. Second, our traveling habits. What type of car we use? Do we travel overseas a lot? Do we take public transportation? Those will have a certain amount of carbon footprints. And then third is our household. What we consume in the household, our size, the numbers. Do we use a lot of like electricity? Do you use energy efficient? So measurement in these three areas, you're able to assess your own kind of structure. Now, according to BP research, Malaysia CO2 emission itself, right, in this area side, we kind of like amounted to like 250.3 million tons last year, which is up from 241.6 million tons in 2017. And the main sources of this emission in these three areas, one is in energy, number two is in mobility, and number three is in waste. In terms of energy, electrical consumption and everything, it's like there's a lot of elements, right? So from our um, cities, our house, so it's really we have to evaluate. Mobility goes back to how we drive, how we live. But waste is something that we actually can control, right? That's why it's like I talk more on waste because that is the area that my specialty is in. All right. So to understand your environmental impact through waste audit, and this is I think some of you have trying to do waste auditing your own waste from home. In current situation, right? In Malaysia, so the current situation in Malaysia is in 2005, basically Malaysia, we produce about 19,000 tons of trash daily. And then in 2018, we increased up more than 200% increase to about 38,142 tons daily. And the increasing in by 2020 itself it's not stopping. It's actually increasing more and more. So only the data that for 2019 2020 we haven't really received from the department. But I assure you, we're not reducing. It's still kind of like going up, right? But waste composition itself, if we look at the whole municipal waste composition set through the landfill, almost 50% of the waste, it is organic waste, food waste, right? So we don't need to say this is right or wrong. Let's just look. Every time we go to Kenduri, every time we go to family function, right? How many food waste do we actually do? Do we take as much food as possible from buffet and then at the end it's like we just throw it out? If that's yes, it's like then it's true because it really reflects on our culture itself, right? So it doesn't decide for puasa, for example, what happened during the puasa month. Hotels have a lot of these buffets, and yet at the end of the night, there's a lot of food waste, right? Bazaar Ramadans, our own household. So we don't even need to look far. We just look at our own consumption, and it is true. Food waste is one of the things that we are so used to it. You know, that food that we buy kind of in larger quantity that we consume, we put in the fridge. After that, what happened? Do we eat it or do we just throw it out because it's like we don't like the taste? It's like, and that's how it is, right? And then plastic is about 20.28%. Then there's papers about 17.89%, metals about 4.3%, glass is for 2.6%, and others is 8%. And others is mostly mixed material, right? So food waste is one of the area that we can reduce. Then there's plastics, then there's papers. So generally, it's like Malaysia is reportedly generating an immense amount of municipal solid waste, which is around 33,000 ton per day, which is equivalent to about 1.17 kilogram person per day. Right? So every single day, on average, it's like Malaysians, like we put out 1.17 kg of trash to the landfill. Now, remember this. Every state, whenever we put something to the landfills, right, it is causing money. So it takes billions of from the taxes that we pay, taxes that can go into development of rural community, development of cities, development of infrastructure, to actually just put waste into landfill. And that is a waste of resources. Why? Because we haven't actually minimized our waste going to landfill. We haven't looked into a more sustainable solution into waste management itself. So if the government that can't really implement this, we as a household should be able to do it, right? We need to contribute as well. So if we were able to reduce the waste and everything, we're able to help minimizing this cost. And once minimizing this cost, then we're able to look, it's like maybe it's like there are some funds, it's like for better roads, better education, better school facilities, you know. So, and this is something that everyone should be aware of. Now, to like food waste itself, it's like it is a whole issue. It's like, so that's more on the consumption and our habit. But when it comes to plastic, right? Plastic waste, I think, is the one of the biggest, what everyone is pretty much just like talking about. Everyone is pretty much addressed. And I love to share this video about the Midas Touch, right? Produced by a part of the Clean Seas campaign, which Impact Lucian, we're also a part of the Clean Seas Malaysia and then the Clean Seas campaign. So this really kind of talk about the whole problematic with plastic, from not just from the producing, the consumption, also the alternative itself. And it kind of gave a really good idea how it affects us and what kind of solution there to be. So let's watch it.
When the gods granted King Midas one wish, he wished that everything he touched would turn to gold. Midas was delighted. Trees, rocks, buildings, all gold. But soon he found in horror that his food turned into gold as well. When he hugged his daughter to soothe his pain, he realized his mistake too late. The richest man in existence was starving, heartbroken, and alone. Humanity got a similar wish granted when we learned how to turn brown, stinky goo into magic. Plastic. Cheap, sterile, and convenient, it changed our lives. But this wonder of technology got a little out of hand. Plastic has saturated our environment. It has invaded the animals we eat, and now it's finding its way into our bodies. What is plastic? For most of our history, humans used stuff we found in nature to build the things we needed. But the invention of plastic roughly 100 years ago completely changed our world. Plastic is made from polymers, long, repeating chains of molecule groups. In nature, polymers exist everywhere. The walls of cells, silk. Hair, insect carapaces, DNA. But it's also possible to create them. By breaking down crude oil into its components and rearranging them, we can form new synthetic polymers. Synthetic polymers have extraordinary traits. They are lightweight, durable, and can be molded into almost any shape. Not requiring time-consuming manual work, plastic can be easily mass-produced, and its raw materials are available in vast amounts and incredibly cheaply. And so the golden era of plastics began. Bakelite was used for mechanical parts, PVC for plumbing, electric gears and cases, acrylic as a shatter-resistant alternative to glass, and nylon for stockings and war equipment. Today, almost everything is at least partly made from plastic. Our clothes, phones, computers, furniture, appliances, houses and cars. Plastic has long ceased to be a revolutionary material. Instead, it became trash. Coffee cups, plastic bags, or stuff to wrap a banana. We don't think about this fact a lot. Plastic just appears and goes away. Unfortunately, it doesn't. Since synthetic polymers are so durable, plastic takes between 500 and 1,000 years to break down. But somehow, we collectively decided to use this super tough material for things meant to be thrown away. 40% of plastics are used for packaging. In the US, packaging makes up 1/3 of all the waste that is generated annually. Since its invention, we have produced about 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic, 335 million tons in 2016 alone. More than 6.3 billion metric tons of plastic have become waste since 1907. Piled up in one place, that makes a cube with a side length of 1.9 kilometers. So, what did we do with all this waste? 9% was recycled, 12% burned, but 79% of it is sticking around still. A lot ends up in the ocean, around 8 million tons a year. That's so much plastic that it will outweigh all the fish in the ocean by 2050. Because it's everywhere, marine animals keep getting trapped in plastic and swallowing it. In 2015 already, 90% of seabirds had eaten plastic. Many animals starve with stomachs full of indigestible trash. In 2018, a dead sperm whale washed up in Spain. He had eaten 32 kilos of plastic bags, nets, and a drum. While this is tragic and makes for great magazine covers, there's an even more widespread, invisible form of plastic. Microplastics. Microplastics are pieces smaller than 5 millimeters. Some of them are used in cosmetics or toothpaste, but most result from floating waste that is constantly exposed to UV radiation and crumbles into smaller and smaller pieces. 51 trillion such particles float in the ocean, where they are even more easily swallowed by all kinds of marine life. This has raised concerns among scientists, especially about health risks from the chemicals that are added to plastic. BPA, for example, makes plastic bottles transparent, but there's also evidence that it interferes with our hormonal system. DEHP makes plastics more flexible, but may cause cancer. It would be pretty bad if microplastics are toxic because they travel up the food chain. Zooplankton eat microplastic. Small fish eat zooplankton. So do oysters, crabs, and predatory fish. And they all land on our plate. Microplastics have been found in honey, in sea salt, in beer, in tap water, and in the household dust around us. 8 out of 10 babies and nearly all adults have measurable amounts of phthalates, a common plastic additive, in their bodies. And 93% of people have BPA in their urine. There is little science about this so far, and right now it's inconclusive. We need a lot more research before panic is justified. But it is safe to say that a lot of stuff happened that we didn't plan for, and we have lost control over plastic to a certain extent, which is kind of scary. But just to make sure, we should simply ban plastics, right? Unfortunately, it's a bit more complicated than that. Plastic pollution is not the only environmental challenge we face. Some of the substitutes we'd use for plastic have a higher environmental impact in other ways. For example, according to a recent study by the Danish government, making a single-use plastic bag requires so little energy and produces far lower carbon dioxide emissions compared to a reusable cotton bag that you need to use your cotton bag 7,100 times before it would have a lower impact on the environment than the plastic bag. We're left with a complex process of trade-offs. Everything has an impact somehow, and it's hard to find the right balance between them. Plastic also helps solve problems that we don't have very good answers for at the moment. Globally, 1/3 of all food that's produced is never eaten and ends up rotting away on landfills where it produces methane. And the best way of preventing food from spoiling and avoiding unnecessary waste is still plastic packaging. It's also important to note where the vast majority of the world's plastic pollution is coming from right now. 90% of all plastic waste entering the ocean through rivers comes from just 10 rivers in Asia and Africa. The Yangtze in China alone flushes 1.5 million tons of plastic into the ocean each year. Countries like China, India, Algeria, or Indonesia industrialized at an impressive pace in the last few decades, transforming the lives of billions of people. This development was so fast that the garbage disposal infrastructure couldn't keep up with collecting and recycling all the new waste this brought. If politicians in Europe and the US want to address this issue, investing in infrastructure in developing countries is just as important as fighting plastic pollution at home, with campaigns and redesigning products to minimize unnecessary plastic production. The bottom line is, as long as we don't address plastic pollution from a global perspective, we will not solve it. Plastic pollution is a complicated problem. We found a magic material and we had a really good time with it. But we need to be careful, or just like Midas, we'll end up in a world that we didn't wish for. Your individual daily actions still have a huge impact. What you do matters. Refuse disposable plastics. Convince your friends and family to do the same. Pressure companies and politicians to take the necessary steps to keep our oceans clean and our food safe. Together, we can beat plastic pollution. This video was a collaboration with UN Environment and their Clean Seas campaign. If you want to take action to turn the tide on plastics, go to cleanseas.org and make your pledge.
So yeah, so basically for this Clean Seas campaign, just to inform that Impact Ocean, we're also with a lot of other groups for the Clean Seas Malaysia, which is a part of the whole project in Malaysia itself. So everyone should play a part. So like I said, it's like the video really shows that just banning plastic is not really something that is easy. That's why it's taking a lot of hard time to actually ban plastic. But at the same time, our use and dependent on plastic has been kind of misleading in the sense that something that is durable, we create for one-time use, right? So that's where we need to change. So we have to acknowledge that the fact that, yes, we are living in a marvelous time. The most and advanced durable material created by engineers and scientists has become our lifesavers, but also a curse, right? On one hand, it has made our life better, easier, but at the same time, it is one of the biggest environmental challenge in this new world itself. And we see this, right? We see the picture, we see what's happening, we see it. But if we look at the pictures, right? This is what reality is if you go to any of the stores right now. We see a lot of this packaging. Right? So we've seen that how that the plastic itself is impacting on us. It's like when a plastic that goes into the ocean, it breaks into microplastic, it breaks into small fishes, and then we consume then we consume it after fish consume it after it's absorbed into the a part of the salt component itself. So why single-use plastic? So this is what we are saying, because plastic doesn't degrade. It is still a petroleum base, which is we have to acknowledge the fact that petroleum itself, oil, it is not an infinite kind of like resources, right? It is finite. There is limitation. If we look at the numbers of our reservoir, our oil wells, right? How many of it are brown fields? How many are new fields? Do we have enough reservoir? So the question is, do we need to use some of this material to create plastic, or can we prolong it by reducing for further resources that we need to move to use as fuel, right? So we have to be smart in terms of using resources, and this is what we're talking about, right? So just to share a little bit of these, our when we did this year for World Cleanup Day, the 10-minute cleanup challenge. This is some of the breakdown of this waste itself, right? From cigarette butts to plastic bottles, grocery bags, food wrappers, plastic bottles. So we did a study to comparing Kuala Lumpur, Putrajaya, and Pahang to see, because this was a collaboration with Alam Flora. So we have the data to really uh, evaluate in terms of all this trade from the urban setting and the rural setting itself, from city cleanups and beach cleanup, what we found itself. And then in terms of what we found top-wise, we see in the city centers itself, plastic pollution, when we talk about our carbon footprint, our environmental impact itself, cigarette butts is the biggest, right? So for all of you smokers out there, please note that the filters are not biodegradable, they are plastic, right? The cigarette filters are plastic itself. So that's why they are uh, considered as single-use plastic itself, right? Then in Pahang, we did more of this beach cleanup itself, where we mostly we find more plastic bottles. So depending on location, the plastic the waste composition itself is different. So that means environmental impact of how areas are being used has a different impact itself when it comes to waste. So when we want to look into solutions of how to tackle a lot of this issue, we need to go local. A solution in Kuala Lumpur might not work in Pahang. The solution in Pahang might not work in Johor, right? We have to understand what is the problem, and this is what Impact Solution we've been doing in the last few years, is trying to collect data to understand better in terms of this waste littering problem itself. How to address this issue in society itself is that we want to see how we can actually create a program that is more meaningful and to minimize impact in a localized setting, right? And when we talk about, especially it's like in Malaysia, it's like one of the three ways is like waste itself that we are talking about is in the waste management itself, right? But in this post COVID-19, we have to address plastic pollution, right? So the change of our carbon footprint in terms of in the landfill itself in this post COVID-19, we see reduction in food waste, but we see increase in plastic waste. Why? The first of all is our tapau or bungkus culture. That is the most basic thing, right? So let's reflect. Yeah? Everyone just reflect. In the last 1 week, how much plastic packaging have you consumed, right? How much often you order food from Food Panda, GrabFood, all these food delivery companies, right? Because we are too lazy to actually go out, spend 5 minutes bringing our own containers and buy food, right? So, and that is, you have to reflect, it's like, because that's what it is. It is our tapau and bungkus culture. So, and that is one of the main contributor itself in terms of our use of single-use plastic. Because study shows is like the most used single-use are unbranded plastic. That means not coming from big brands, but actually it's like the bungkus tepi, it's like from Mama, it's like all these like tapau containers, it's like disposable containers. Those are the biggest one. Second, the rise of alternative materials, right? When it comes to one of the thing that when we fight about in terms of plastic pollution, it's like we say it's like, oh, we can use biodegradable paper boxes. The question is, does it solve the problem? We still use it singly for single use, and we still put it back into the landfills. But when we look at the actual item itself, it's like when we want to identify plastic, right? Let's look at the paper cups. If you are frequent like me, it's like I do kind of get my coffees a lot. So it's like I know it's like on campus a lot of you guys do goes to get your coffee, right? The paper cup itself, it is not really recyclable. Why? Because the inner lining itself is actually plastic, low density polyethylene. The outer shell itself is just paper, right? But when it comes to recycling, you cannot recycle it. right? Then the third is we believe that all plastic is recyclable, right? So when it comes to our impact in terms of this area of especially plastic consumption, we believe that all plastic is recyclable. Now, when recycling, we face two problems. One, we have to address what can be recycled. And this is where a lot of people don't know or just generalize industries is that will generalize think plastic can be recycled. No, right? Then second, can it actually be recycled? Right. So most of you knows the numbering on plastic, right? So if we look at number one, which is PET bottles, so that's mostly your water bottles, a lot of these food containers. Then your HDPE, the thicker one, your detergent, your milk bottles. So those are. Then the PVCs is like, and then the LDPEs, which is mostly plastic bags, grocery bags, plastic films, and then your PP, polypropylene, which is mostly your straws, your disposable containers. It's like those are mostly made from PP plastic. And then number six, which is polystyrene, and then number seven, others, which is mostly mixed material. Out of all of this, right? Out of all these seven types of plastic, when it comes to recycling, you can only do number one. The industry says like number one, number two, and number five. That is the most industries. But at the end of the day, number five, which is polypropylene, you cannot recycle because the condition of a lot of this material are made it non-recyclable. Why? Let's reflect, okay? After you buy your food, right, from in a disposable plastic containers, do you actually wash it before you put in the recycling bin? No, you don't wash it. You just throw it away. Same goes with your milk teas, your bubble teas, and everything. You buy it, you don't really wash it. You throw it away, and that makes most of this recyclable material cannot be recycled. And we have to acknowledge it, right? So we cannot recycle our way out of this plastic problem. So we have to reduce, we have to rethink, and then we have to look into how our lifestyle we can change to minimize the impact to the environment itself, right? At the end of the day, recycling is not an easy process. We have to really identify between recyclable, trash, compostable. We need to know all of this before we can actually apply it itself, right? Then lastly is our eating habit, right? So eating habit. So remember, like when I said in our carbon footprint, our dietary habit itself is one of the biggest. In this list, I put in the fourth category because fresh food versus processed food. In the last few weeks, it's like how many times you consume fresh food. That means something that you cook, right? And then versus buying just processed foods like your fast food, your chocolates, your snacks, it's like all these processed foods, like those are things mostly wrapped in plastic. And we start to be honest, right? Just honest about our consumption. If we're not honest about how we consume it, we're never going to change. But once we're honest about it, we know how to address it. We know what we need to do, right? So which one you consume more? To the left is a fresh vegetables, fruits. Do you consume this more? Or to the right,
Yes.
do you consume that more? Your bubble tea, your super your twisties inside. So which one do you consume more? So and we have to start be honest. But even in our dietary habits, even in the fresh produce, the question is, where do you buy it? Is it packed in plastic or is it unpacked itself, right? So knowing the source where you buy it, am I buying from a pasar that is, packed every single vegetable fruit in plastic, clean wrap, or am I going to the pasar basah where I can buy all these things that unpacked itself? So, right? So doesn't mean that it's like you consume just the all this fresh food. doesn't mean it's not have environmental impact in terms of waste, right? How it's being managed itself is so we have to address this side. So to make a mindset change aside, first we can change from an unhealthy diet to a healthy diet. Once we do that, then we should like, does it produce waste? How we manage it better, right? And then lastly, this is what we call, lastly we call it waste or sampah. The problem when we look at a lot of the time in the environmental impact, in the carbon footprint in terms of our waste, because we call it sampah, we call it waste, because we determine that there is no value. When we say it's sampah, there's no value to it. When there's no value to this materials, resources, then you just throw it out rather than think, what can I do with it? All my household organic waste, what can I do with it? The plastic waste in my home, what can I do with it? The cans, what can I do with it, right? So we have to change the language from waste to sampah to resources, because everything is a resources, right? It's not sampah, it's not waste. Nothing is waste because everything is still a resources. We still need to know how to manage resources well. And for all of you, so especially in engineering, right, you have to think this, because the future itself is all about innovation, right? And I love to share a quote by Paulo Coelho. The world is changed by your example, not by your opinion. Online, it's easy for us to say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. You know, it's easy for us in this golden age of social media. It is easy for us to comment, but the question is, do you practice it, right? So your action, that is an example, really do it's much more better than your opinion, right? You need to lead by example, right? Sustainably for the future. And we've seen the trend changing, right? In this new day and age, where how sustainability has led in change for the future. In terms of energy, we've start talking about renewable energy. We've start putting in policy about solar and everything, right? So to look into biodiesels, like rather than just 100% diesel. Connectivities is like we've seen smartphones and internet use. Then automotive is that we see the creation of energy efficient vehicle system, electrical vehicle, hybrid system. So we've looked into this. Plastic, we come up with the whole idea of biodegradables, right? Waste, it's like we look into waste to energy, zero waste, it's like we look at it. So, but there's always the what is next. Who are we? Who are you wanting to be? Right? What future do you want to emulate? What future do you want to create? What kind of industry? Yeah? But in this future solution that we say green now, sustainable and ethical, right? So we have to reflect back at the videos, right? Like the Midas touch. Are we going to repeat the cycle with green innovation that at the end of those life cycle, we cannot reuse the material? Is it long lasting enough? Is it reusable? Is it repairable, right? So we have to understand. Doesn't mean that the creation of green now to minimize this carbon footprint in the next 20, 30 years will not create the next problem. And we've seen this with plastic. And we've started seeing this in the creation of some of the material created using in wind turbines, right? And this is what we have to do. Like Midas touch, if we don't look at this whole cycle again and evaluate now, are we going to repeat the same mistake like we did with plastic? So at the end of the day, leadership starts with us, right? When we design, as an engineer, like when we design solutions, when we design processes, right? So we have to really change our mindset, the ego mindset or the eco mindset. The ego mindset, we always believe we are on top, right? The rest is below us. And that's how we create this structure. But when we have the mindset of an eco mindset, we are a part of an ecosystem. We need to preserve, we need to prolong, we need to conserve. And that's when we start looking into how can we better, how we can improve our processes, how can improve our project management, how we can improve in the design. And that's when innovation creation, jobs are created because we rethink the norm processor to reinvent new process that is sustainable, and we keep continue the process to minimizing the impact. Just because at one point you've already minimized the impact in your carbon footprint, in your design, doesn't mean it should stop there. It should be innovated. It should be continuous. Like how can we improve further? Okay? So for my sessions, like right now, like that's it. And we go to the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Mr. Faisal. Actually, while you were talking, some of the students already left some questions in the chat. So I'll
Alright.
just read one out. Someone asked, even the things that can be recycled, are those also considered waste?
Recycle, if those that can be recycled, it is recycled, right? But remember, when we recycle something, it doesn't recycle back into the items that can be reused in the same materials, right? For
Yeah.
example, a lot of the PET bottles, when they recycle, they don't recycle back into PET bottle, right? What they recycle back is into mixed material like uh, into fibers to make clothing, right? Your most of this mixed material of clothing, at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, you cannot recycle that items. So recycling is not really a solution at this point, right? So and we have to address this issue because a lot of the time when we say it's like yes, we can just recycle out of plastic, we say no, we cannot. What we need to is minimizing. Yeah, minimizing and reducing. Yes, it's like if there is if you end up, let's say, with it, recycle it because that is the most sustainable and most ethical way to manage that particular waste, but doesn't mean it is the right way. We're just helping a little bit. The more that we can reduce, the more we can actually prevent. That is what we need to do, right? So we have to further. So if you want to start, you can start with recycling, right? But you cannot just decide just because you recycle, it's done. No, it's always about improving. Once you start building that element of like, okay, I'm good at recycling, I'm good at doing all this process, I understand the whole process better. Always check what can I do next. Improve a little bit, right? Set a achievable goal, right? Set an achievable goal that you can get it done, rather than unachievable goal that you decided this is pointless. So
When you're too ambitious, sometimes you cannot
yes,
continuously do it.
yes. So that's something you need to do, right? So for me, it's like it's easy. It's like if I can avoid it, I'll avoid it. If I can't, I'll still consume it. But then it's like if let's say I end up with something that is recyclable, what I do is I wash it, I dry it, make sure it's clean, send it to a proper recycling programs, right? I vetted through all the recycling program that around my area, so I know where to send it without actually putting in a bin like feel good. It's like out of mind, out of sight. No,
Yes.
those recycling program that I engage, I know they do recycling right, right? If I end up with single-use plastic, like behind me is like all the eco bricks is like that I make for my own home furnitures and everything is just made from the plastic waste. It's like that we collect from communities and everything, right? So I make my own furnitures using plastic waste, making modular structure from eco bricks, make my own furniture at home. So that's what I do. So you can do that as well. So it's always about improving itself.
All right. What else? Let's see. And do you know of any other materials that are as effective as plastic?
At this moment, there is not.
Yeah,
It's not.
unfortunately.
When we look at the whole production, right, of this plastic production, yes, it's like it is the most in terms of carbon footprint is the lowest, but in terms of waste management is the hardest to name. When people say it's like we should go back to all the glass, for example, right? So we have to address in terms of deliverabilities and everything. If you're doing mass-produced consumptions, glass itself is heavy. So when you deliver something, it is has a higher carbon footprint.
Yes.
But what a lot of people don't address is the mining of sand for glass, right? How it is impacting the environment when you mine a lot of the glass. In Malaysia, we can see mining of sand in Perak, how it endangered some of the our turtle species, uh, and that is an environmental impact. If we are creating a solution, it's like if we want something solution, we can't just decide this material is better. We need to look at the whole cycle from production to the disposal, from cradle to cradle, right? From there, we understand the environmental impact itself. Same goes with using some of this, I would say, in this generation it's like, of social media. Most of the time when it comes to our social media, we want to look Instagrammable, right? So yes, we say it's like, oh yeah, we don't use plastic straw, and yet you keep buying metal straw every single time. You keep losing it, you keep buying it, you keep buying metal straw, metal straw. Do you know that you still need to mine metal,
The
right?
materials, yes.
Materials, you still need to mine the material, and mining the material, it is not, it's like it's more destructive than what we have now compared to the oil field that we've overdeveloped in the previous years. So it's not about changing just material, it is about doing it sustainably. It's like, it's like you have to understand just because you change doesn't mean it. And now it's like the whole idea, oh, you know what, I'm going to buy a new tiffin box, pemangkut tingkat. Because why? It looks cool, it looks neat. And yet in your own household you have like tons of plastic containers that you can reuse over and over again, right?
Yeah.
So it is, you have to balance out what you want to do. It's like just because something looks Instagrammable,
Yes.
something looks good, it's like you, because you want to be a part of the change, doesn't mean it's the right way. You have to understand that. And
Yes.
this is what I'm saying. It's like sometimes that blind activism doesn't question these items because it's like, oh, we want to solve this, but it's like this is the alternative. No. Reuse. The idea is reuse. It's like open back your containers. How many of some of those hard containers you can reuse over and over again, right? So it's like
Yep.
I have, for me, for example, I have a coffee mug, uh, coffee containers that I use since 2012. Sorry, it's like 2012. No, since 2008. I
Oh, that
still
has been
use
a
it.
while.
Yeah, so it's still good to use. I still take care of my items, and I still reuse it. So I have a plastic containers that I got when I started working in an oil and gas company, and I still use it to nowadays. And that's what since 2012, this container, and yet people are like, oh, it's like, why don't you use a stainless steel container? Why are you still using plastic? I'm like, look, this plastic container, I've been using it since 2012. I'm not going to just buy a new one just to change the idea of like plastic is bad. At the end of the day, they are good, they are bad. The question is how we use it, right?
Yes.
So in terms of this, then some will justify in this area side when it comes to a lot of, oh, the effects of chemicals aside of plastic in your body and everything. I'm like, if that is the concern, then you cannot just have this silo kind of like view that is the only form. Look around your house. How many plastics that is in your house? Your hot cars. If you go in, how much plastic vapor do you actually inhale when you enter a car in a hot, yeah, right? And
Yeah.
most of the car parts is PVC, right? It makes from PVC, so that means it is mostly highly so if that is the case, if you're really concerned about that as like coming into your body, then you have to evaluate your whole ecosystem itself. So it doesn't. So you have to know what you're willing and not, but you can't say it's right or wrong in a sense without actually looking at the whole structure itself. You have to address that. If that is the concern, then and there is some people who are in this field side, and this is why I say a lot of some of these kind of like groundwork activists when they talk about this, and yet you're still smoking. I'm like you're so concerned about plastic, and yet you kind of smoke and put nicotine, all this carcinogen thing into your body and everything through a plastic filter. So where's the the
Yeah,
the I the
a little bit of hypocrisy there.
yes. So when it comes something to go into your body, look, plastic is just one. The type of food is near. So you have to be kind of like understand what are you fighting for. You can't just take facts and then just because someone say it's right, because you have to evaluate itself, right? And that is the right way to minimizing our impact, because once we do that, we understand better the whole cycle, right? In one portion, then we're able to see what we can do to minimize it, because nothing we do, it says there's no impact at all to the environment.
Yeah, there will be impact somewhere. It's just
Yes.
minimizing it.
Minimizing it.
All right. I'm sorry to the students, but because we are a bit short on time, so I'll be handpicking the questions. And also, if Mr. Faisal, if you see something that you really want to answer, you're also welcome to answer that. But I'll just choose at the moment for now. So since a lot of people are doing online shopping now, especially during the COVID time, so someone asked online shopping versus going out to buy it ourselves. So there are pros and cons, but in terms of packaging and transportation and whatnot, is there one that is actually better than the other, as in online shopping versus going out to buy it ourselves?
Okay, so in terms of like online shopping versus like physical shopping, right? One, I would say is like both has an environmental impact. No matter what kind of shopping, it's like it has to be manufactured, it has to be
It has to
But
be sent.
it
to
has to
our
be
house.
said. It says
Yeah.
so. It's like you still have to drive. There is an impact. So the question is, what do you want to minimize? If you want to minimize in terms of your impact in the plastic, then physical, right? Because then you can look at it, choose it, and everything. Then you can, if you minimize it in the carbon, then it's like you have, in truth, it's like shopping in general doesn't minimize any carbon footprint because it still have to manufacture. I would say go for, rather than in terms of this online shopping, the question is adopting a minimalist lifestyle. Ask yourself, do you really need those items, or can I live without it? Is it a luxury or is it a necessity, right? So, and this is where if we want to minimize our carbon footprint, it's not about shopping, it's about minimizing, buying new things. Is there an options to buy secondhand, right? Reuse item,
Yeah.
right? So it's like rather than buying new items in fast fashion, especially in fast fashion, we have to understand there's no such thing as ethical production in fast fashion. Most of fast fashion are produced by underpaid laborers, child laborers, right? They are putting it out there as like cheaply. Why? Because they have access to cheap laborers. They exploited people. So the idea of ethical, right? Just because, like say, a brand say it's sustainable, it's green, doesn't mean it's ethical.
Yes.
So we have to put hand to hand sustainability and ethical. So we can't just say it's sustainable, but without
The
close
ethic.
our mind on the ethics, right? So look at it in that sense. Is it ethical as well? If you understand the whole culture, then you're able to better plan itself into how you can minimize and mitigate this whole process.
All right. Okay. I'm sure these students are quite interested in your kind of lifestyle, which is, I have to say, a bit different from mine. Even though I do try to minimize where I can. So, is it they want to know, and I also want to know, is it hard to transition from, normal lifestyle that I think most of us are living to the carbon-free lifestyle?
Okay. So when it comes to I can't say carbon free because there's using electricity and everything is there's still
Low carbon then.
low carbon. What
Yes.
so basically it's like low carbon lifestyle is all about understanding your daily life itself. What is your lifestyle? The first thing you need to evaluate is what is your lifestyle? What are you comfortable with? Right? For me, the first when I started convert into low carbon lifestyle is looking back into my food, right? Is this product is produced locally or imported, especially vegetables, right? So am I buying imported fruits or local fruits? So I start to change that. Rather than consume anything imported, I only consume things that is local, right? That is the first thing, right? Then second, I look into of my mobility itself. In Kuala Lumpur itself, it's quite easy because it's like easy access to
Public transport.
public transport and everything. It makes it achievable to minimizing my carbon footprint by taking uh, public transports and stuff. But at the same time, I've been driving a hybrid car since 2000 and I would say it's like 2010. It's almost 2011. It's almost 10 years of a car that I've been using rather than buying new ones. And some of us in Malaysia, we have a tendency every 5 years we change cars, right?
Yes,
So
there's
it's like
a tendency of some.
yeah, we change. So no, it's like I decided to remain using my old car for almost 10 years. It's like keep using it, right? So
As long as
repair
it's
it
not broken.
as long I can use it, I use that. And
Mm.
then so that's how I use it. I don't care about appearance, right? And this is what a lot of the time, especially for students, in this new in age, is that when you go in any industry, the first trap that you will go into is appearance. You want to look that you are successful, that you have to subscribe to a lifestyle that buying certain type of cars. When a simple Myvi is like, it's like will take you to point A to point B without the excess in terms of the financial burden itself, right? So you think it's like, to be green, I need to buy an electric car. So it's like all this kind of expensive cars. So it's like no, it's like sometimes it's like you have to understand what is your lifestyle. To achieving a goal that you want, it's all about if you are going for a fuel car, then the question is what is the energy, the fuel efficiency of that car itself, right? So how much per uh, liter that you can go, and that makes a difference. The more you kind of look into it, the more you can choose a better options without banging the bugs itself. So once you understand your lifestyle, you look at, okay, where do I want to start? Then you start there, understanding. So, for example, one of the biggest things is like when I started, I thought in this whole low carbon lifestyle, I thought that okay, a part of it is like I shouldn't support like the dairy farm, for example, right? I should not drink milk. I should drink almond milk, all this plant-based milk. But when you look into the whole ethics, the whole behind the scene of almond farming and everything, right? So then you start question: is it a sustainable industry to support, right? How some of this you have to understand that. So you have to do a lot of research. You have to be open-minded, right? Just because a solution is like it says by some of these influencers, it's like it's true. It's like doesn't mean it is. You have to come to your own opinion and result, right? You have to do the research, and it's okay to agree to disagree at this point because it's like at the end of the day, it is your lifestyle, what you want to achieve, right?
Yep.
Just because someone says it's like this is the right way doesn't mean it is right for you.
There's
You
no
have to
right or
find
wrong, right?
yes. So you have to find the right way for you itself. And this is where we have to define. We can't just accept. We have to question. From industry side, we have to question. From the activist side, we have to question. because no one has the right answer, no one has the right framework. We have to create a right framework for our lifestyle to be more sustainable and ethical.
Okay. So I think quite a lot of questions about banning plastic. So I'll just choose one. So if one day all plastics were banned, will we be able will we be able to adapt, and how, and perhaps something that we can expect as a replacement?
Well, when the way I say is like when one day if all plastic are banned, I think it's like mostly it's like the ban on the use of single use, right? So
I
it
would
will
think so.
yeah, it will mostly revolutionize in a sense our look into mass production, right? Reliance on mass consumer products. So that is the easiest way that I can look at it. What we don't see is mass produced product. That means there's no more mass production from big companies. It's mostly locally produced, right? So with to avoid all this, it's like we see a more localized cottage industries, a more localized artisanal industries, it's like that is being booming in local sectors rather than going big to mass production. The problem with use of plastic packaging, single-use plastic, is because mass production.
Yep.
Because we want something that is produced fast and cheap, we rely. So let's the easiest, right? If let's say you want to buy a bread right now, roti, right? Do you know other options rather than Gardenia and Massimo or whatever that you can buy from the mart? Do you know the local bakery that you can actually go and buy this thing untied? Is there any support system, right? So those are kind of the industry we are looking at. It's like one day if there is need, it's like the whole manufacturing process, rather than a centralized factory, it might be localized itself, right? So it might turn into, rather than a big factory, a cottage industry is like a normal shop lots and everything, where but when that happen, we have to remember, when that happen, price will increase because operation cost itself increase itself.
Higher, yes.
Yes,
Because it's
because
no longer mass produced.
it's not just mass produced, machineries and upkeep and everything, it requires more in that sense. So we have to so we have to kind of look at like the balance itself, right? So how to do that is like yes, go back to the local side, find your alternative in terms of bakeries that is selling a loaf of bread that is pretty much on par with whatever prices that you're comfortable with, right? So you have to change that option itself. In terms of packaging, I don't see in a way that alternative to biodegradables to become the next norm in a lot of this packaging, because at the end of the day, even in the bio industry itself, the source of material, right? So we have to address the source of where, if we're talking about bioplastic, where are we getting the source from? Are we just plant more crops just to extract materials and fight for the source of land to produce food, right? So that is it's all about it. So it happens. We see, for example, it's like the whole idea of using cassava roots like to build this plastic. It has changed in terms of the cost of a cheap available food for a local community to become a more expensive, because why? There is an industry who wants to buy all this to make a resin, and they are willing to pay high more. So you are cutting the local source food for the local people to make it unaccessible. So it is become a side. Is the question is like, just because is it ethical in the whole process, right? If we are looking at the whole idea of biodegradables, we need to look at, like in Malaysia setting, what can we produce from all of our organic waste, right? We have to look at the source, because if it's 40% going to landfill, our organic waste that can be produced into method, can that material be reprocessed back into become polylactic acid or become the new resin to produce plastic, right? And it's a much more sustainable approach in terms of how we can do biodegradables
From waste.
from waste, not from virgin material itself, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where we have to look. But at the end of the day, biodegradable itself, just because it's labeled biodegradable, compostable, doesn't mean in nature it will biodegrade or compost. There are certain conditions it need to biodegrade and compost, right?
Yeah.
So the question is, how do we manage those waste later? And this is what I say is like Midas touch, if we are not aware from the cradle to the cradle, the whole cycle, we're just going to repeat the whole cycle of plastic problem again, over and over again. So this is where it's like, you guys are the key. As future engineers, future designers, future project managers, you guys are the keys to rethink, redesign back again. Just because it's the norm now doesn't mean it is the way of the future, right? If you put it in the whole structure of in green project management, we call the 5 Ps, right? In normal project management, you put the 3 Ps: product, process, profit. That's it. In a green project management, you put people, planet, product, process, and prosperity, right? So GPM really trains project managers to think in the 5 Ps, in the more sustainable. You never think about the product, process, and profit. You always think the people first, the planet, the product, the process, and the prosperity. Why? We don't call profit because profit is only talking about the untung for only one person, whoever owns the company. But when you talk about prosperity, you're talking about
Everyone.
wealth distribution, right? So in the operations side, if you talk about prosperity, it's like, look, it's like there are some income backs going back to the people to develop back the community within, developing a community, developing a projects that is more sustainable. Those are the things you put back, reinvest back in the operation rather than all these bosses take all the profit and just enjoy, and the workers keep working like bulls, right?
Yeah.
And this is someone who were in the oil and gas industry, and I've seen it. I was in the oil and gas industry since 2010 and 2016, 8 years. I've seen how profit driven has pretty much destroyed the oil and gas industry itself. And it's like we've seen the oil and gas collapse in 2016, 2017, 2018, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time it's because vendors, local company talk about profit. They didn't really reinvest back in the workers to redevelop the skill, to train them. So they keep jumping and jumping and jumping industry, but without added value skills. So then they are stuck. When they are stuck, at the end, when the recession happens, guess what? You are the first to go. So because there's no value, so it's like you have to reinvest on yourself rather than the company reinvest inside. So that's the same thing. And for you guys, it's like from UTM, it's like highly close ties to the oil and gas industry. It's like this is what you guys will face later on. So we have to be smart, and this is what every project manager should adopt a more of this 5P concept, GPM concept, rather than a normal project management. Yes. So it's like you cannot adopt 3P anymore. It's time for 5P to become a normal practices in any project management. School projects, company project, 5Ps. The 5P will save. And most of, especially in oil, we do have the 5P element, but we separate in the just a section of called HSE. That's it. Health, safety, and environment. But it's separate from the whole project. It's just a component you fill in, but you don't integrate it, right? So that's where it's like we fail. So it's like we need to integrate the HSC element into the project to become a 5P element. So it is a whole value added. So materials, all this is like, yes, it's like we are so, in terms of technology, we look at this material, we look at this new green technology, but at the end of the day, we have to be realistic in this whole cycle. We need to look into of how to manage it properly. We need to look at how do we're able to address all this issue, right? Is the innovation, re-innovate back, how to recycle back, creating a much more durable materials, like creating a much more either it's like material that is more innovative in terms of to tackle the plastic waste. So we have to rethink, redesign.
I feel like Mr. Faisal has given the students and myself a lot of things to think about, especially as engineers, and they, as the future engineers, have a key role in revamping and renewing the world into something that's even better than what we have now, something that is more sustainable for the future generations. So, unfortunately, because we are running out of time, Mr. Pastor, do you have anything, some any more words or advice for the students?
All right. My advice is first thing is like if you want to know more, you can visit us at our Facebook Impactlution or Generasi Peduli Sampah. So we have a lot of things there that we post in terms of some of the solutions and stuff. From there, you can send messages like for more discussions and everything. At the same time, like you can also take part and take action now, right? So because it's never too late. That's why in the early stages we call the projects the Green Phoenix project, because like a phoenix, you will always raise back from the ashes, right?
Yes.
And in this environmental, it is never too late to contribute back. So if we think it's too late, then we just surrender everything and let us just continue on the destruction rather than let's improve, let's continue on. So it's never too late.
All
And
right.
then everyone can also start doing pledges itself in the how can you minimize your own waste production, your waste consumption itself. It's like under the clean seas, it's like what do you pledge? What can I start to reduce my consumption of plastic waste? What can I start reduce in terms of consumption of waste generated in general, right? So you can start doing that. That is the first thing individually you can do now. In terms of professionally, it's like this is where you have the opportunity to research, rethink, redesign, look at what is it that is available, then question the whole from production to from the life cycle, the whole production life cycle from cradle to cradle. Is it sustainable? Then you can reinvent, right? Once you question all of this process, you can look at, okay, there's a gap here in terms of maybe in the waste management, we are not solving the issue with contributing. How can we improve the design? This is where you have an opportunity to be creative, to put that engineering mind to develop something, And I think it's that most of you guys are also chemical engineers, right?
Yes, they are
Yes.
in chemical engineering. Yes.
And this is where look, it's like we are jack of all trade, master of none. That's what I like to That's why I like to call chemical engineers, because we do
Can do
everything.
anything. Yes.
Yes, we are jack of all trade, master of none, and
That's so true.
we are the best person to look at this, because why? Because we have a field of mechanical, we have a field of material science, we have a field of processes. We always fill in the gaps. When we fill in the gaps, we always see the gaps, and that's how I've been doing this. It's like since 2000, and actually, so I've been doing a lot of these environmental things since I was in Montana State University. It's just like working for the under research under the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency doing the water remediations. It's like so Berkeley Pit in US was one of the project site I was managing. It's like working with ConocoPhillips, Exxon, like in research. It's like those are the things that I've done. I've done research for NASA for the Sub-Zero. So it's like, yeah, so because as a chemical engineer, it's like I've done from space to exploration to environment. So it's like in that, because
everything.
we are process people, so we understand process better and faster, right? So once you understand the process, it's like you always like how can you tweak it, how we can tweak it in this area to improve it design wise. Maybe it's like it's just a simple tweak in terms of maybe reducing waste in production, for example, right? So redesign a little bit. So those are the things. It's like, and we are better to do this, it's like in this sense, because we know it.
Okay, Mr. Faisal, thank you for the very passionate talk and all the answers and advice for everyone in attendance. Thank you so much for spending quite a bit of your time. I planned to finish early, but in the end, we did go to 4 o'clock. But
No
thank you
problem.
so much for spending time with us and sharing with us your experiences and knowledge. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, hopefully we can somehow work together again soon.
Yes.
Okay, so sorry I couldn't take every question, but like Faisal said, you can always reach him through his groups, and the names of Impact Lucian or Generasi Peduli Sampah is actually, they are actually in his top posters, so you can always search that as well. So and of course you can always ask your lecturers as well. So okay, so that will be it for today. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Faisal. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.